Welcome in to another episode of my Dynasty Fantasy Football YouTube channel. Today I'm looking at Dynasty buys. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Let's get into our first player. Chris Olave. So we know that Olave came into the year super hyped, played well in 2022 and 2023, but he kind of struggled to take the next step in the Saints' slow offense. In 2022, he had 72 catches, 1,042 yards, 4 touchdowns on 119 targets, 4.8 catches and 69.5 yards per game. That's really, really good for a rookie. Then in 2023, he took a step forward, but maybe not as much as we would have liked. 87 catches, 1,123 yards, 5 touchdowns, 138 targets, 5.4 catches, and 70.2 yards per game. Unfortunately, Olave didn't do much in week 1. He had just 2 catches for 11 yards on 2 targets, scoring 3.1 PPR fantasy points. So not great. However, why do I see Chris Olave as a dynasty buy? The Clint Kubiak offense looked very good. He had a large role and just bad luck in week 1. There are a lot of bad week 1 performances. This one is one of my least concerning. Let's get into why. So the Saints throttled the Panthers 47-10, right? Unfortunately, Olave did not get involved in the early scoring. A drive ended with a long Rashid Shaheed touchdown. Because of the lopsided score, the Saints only had 23 passing attempts from Derek Carr compared to 37 carries. Olave led all Saints wide receivers in snaps and routes run, playing essentially every down. So he was out there. Yes, it was a bad game. But again, I chalk it up more to bad luck than Olave being bad. The offense looked really good, and that will be good for Chris Olave. Most opponents will not be as incompetent on offense as the Panthers, which will mean that the Saints will need to throw the ball a little bit more. So with all of that in mind, how do I recommend acquiring Chris Olave? Now, I get all of these trades from the Dynasty Daddy trade database. Sometimes I make up ones of my own, but all of the ones in today's video are real. So the first trade, you could buy Chris Olave for Brian Thomas and Rico Dowdle. Rico Dowdle looked horrible in week 1. I like Brian Thomas, but we're hoping that Brian Thomas becomes Chris Olave. So I would absolutely do this. But this was not even the worst one. This one was the biggest offender. You could get Chris Olave, Blake Corum, and a 27th third for Rashee Rice and Treylon Burks. This one seems wild to me. Blake Corum might be a strong buy low because he's being included here for nothing. And I would still rather have Olave over Rice. Olave is a lot more proven than Rice. And Rice still has his legal issues that everyone has forgotten about. But there will be a long suspension for Rashee Rice at some point. It didn't go away. It will occur. And that will hurt his value whenever it happens. So I would much rather have the Olave side here. And then this last one, we get Chris Olave in the 25 first for A.J. Brown. I love A.J. Brown, but if it's time to get a bit younger, I don't think there's a 25 first of value between A.J. Brown and Chris Olave. I would take the Olave side here. Next up, T. Higgins. So, of course, Higgins did not play in week 1 due to a hamstring injury, and he struggled with those in the past. From the way that dynasty managers talk about T. Higgins, you would think he's missed 20 or 30 games in his career. He's played in 58 of 69. So he's missed 11 games over 4 years. That's less than 3 a year. I mean, yes, that is some games missed, but it's not like he's missed whole seasons or even long periods of time. Over the games he played, he averaged 4.4 catches and 63.5 yards a game and had 24 touchdowns in those 58 games. These include the games where he barely played or left early. So I guess that's a large part of why people are frustrated with Higgins, but he's really good when he does play and is healthy. Now, why do I have T. Higgins as a dynasty buy? I think this is kind of a last straw moment for dynasty managers, and he is going to get a huge free agent contract in 2025. It will happen. That's not really a debate. And he performs whenever he's healthy. This year, as we know, Higgins playing on the franchise tag. He's going to be a free agent in 2025. The Bengals can't even agree with Jamar Chase. They're not going to agree with T. Higgins. So He'll be the best wide receiver to hit unrestricted free agency in a long time. It's rare for a wide receiver to get there at 26 years old, but he will be. So many teams in the NFL are weak at wide receiver. I guarantee that he will get a really big deal. We're all going to say it's too much money, I'm sure, whenever it's signed somewhere. It's going to be a big deal. Higgins is not out for the year. It's another thing. He is going to come back. The Bengals look like they needed him. The rest of the receivers, other than Chase, are not ready. They're not good. They need T. Higgins this year. I get that it's frustrating, but he's not out for the season. He'll be back in a week or two. So, how to acquire T. Higgins? Okay, let's look at trade number one. T. Higgins and Najee Harris you could get for Jaden Reed and Rashid Shaheed. I feel like this is an overreaction. You just picked two players that scored really well in week one. And yeah, I like Reed and Shaheed, but not this much. I'd much rather have Higgins and Najee Harris. I get why someone would do this if you need to contend to buy Cooper Kupp, but would I really add a first-second swap in 2026 to Higgins to get Kupp? No. If I had Kupp, would I take this to sell? Yes. So this is the kind of move you can do. And then this last one, this is your classic 4 quarters for $1, but you can buy T. Higgins for Ray Davis, Jerry Jeudy, 25 second and 25 third. I mean, there's nothing there that's appealing at all compared to T. Higgins. I'd much rather have T. Higgins. So I would happily do this trade and be very happy with having acquired T. Higgins. If you like my YouTube content, you should sign up for the Patreon. You get my rankings. That's Dynasty and weekly start sit, access to the Discord, and the ability to ask in advance questions for the YouTube videos. Tiers begin at just $6 a month and include all of that. Additionally, start sit and redraft content will only be on the Patreon. This YouTube channel will remain Dynasty Fantasy Football only. If you want to know more about the Patreon, check out both of my Why You Should Join the Patreon videos on the channel. They're on the channel's homepage. I really appreciate everyone who signed up and any new patrons who join. With that said, let's jump into our next player. Rome Odunze. So it wasn't the best debut for Odunze. He did little to nothing in week one with 1 catch for 11 yards on 4 targets. Of course, Caleb Williams had 93 passing yards, so no Bears wide receivers did well, but it still wasn't great. But there are some reasons why I'm kind of into Rome Odunze as a dynasty buy. There are some fears with this MCL injury. Doesn't seem major, but anytime someone is minorly injured, there's a panic. Unnecessary panic about a lot of things. I get it. Odunze didn't do what you wanted week one, and now he's hurt. That sucks, right? I mean, we don't like that. But there were some bright sides. People were constantly afraid of Rome Odunze because of what a completely different player with a completely different quarterback did under the same offensive coordinator, Shane Waldron, last year, what JSN did last year. That didn't happen in week one. It didn't. Odunze played more snaps and ran more routes than Keenan Allen. They split time in both 12 and 21 personnel, 2 wide receiver sets. The role is there for Odunze. He wasn't playing the Shane Waldron screen garbage role that JSN did last year. That was always a ridiculous fear. If you wanted to fade Rome Odunze for other reasons, that's fine. But this was always a bad reason because Odunze and JSN have 0 in common as players. Nothing. Keenan Allen is the one who has things in common with JSN as an archetype, not Rome Odunze. So that was always a mistake. Now, the role is there for Odunze, especially if this was the game 1 usage, which usually favors veterans even more. Just look at Marvin Harrison Jr., who was non-existent in week 1. I love Rome Odunze long-term. So now's a good time to acquire him. There's 3 offers in order of least bad to worst. We could buy Rome Odunze for Brian Thomas and Tank Bigsby. I loved Odunze in the pre-draft process compared to Thomas. Yeah, Bigsby had a good week 1, but the bridge is not, it doesn't bridge the gap. I'd rather have Odunze here. Now, this one is bad. Buy Rome Odunze for Ramondre Stevenson. Yes, I understand that Ramondre Stevenson had a great week 1. Yes, I did see it. No, I'm not giving up a first round, top 10 drafted Dynasty, amazing wide receiver for a 26-year-old running back on a horrible offense. That's not going to happen. Odunze is worth 2 or 3 times as much as Ramondre Stevenson. So this one is crazy. And then now we get to completely insane. Someone traded Jaden Reed and Cole Kmet for Odunze, Mark Andrews, and 2 seconds. Why? I mean, Odunze is worth a lot more than Reed. Andrews is worth more than Kmet, who did nothing at all week 1. And 2 seconds? It's real. It was from the Dynasty Daddy trade database. And honestly, this just goes to show that there are people in Dynasty leagues doing dumb things still. So if you're targeting Rome Odunze, maybe Mark Andrews could have made this video too. Those are players I might look into if people are selling on this type of panic. Now, speaking of panic, I have some NFL news. And I'm not going to talk about every piece of NFL news. This is the one that I think is worth discussing. Christian McCaffrey, calf Achilles injury updates. He missed week 1. That was a surprise. I did not see that coming. He seems likely to miss week 2. Jordan Mason had 28 carries for 147 yards, a touchdown, and a catch for 5 yards in Christian McCaffrey's place. While CMC is out, Mason's a clear workhorse. I'm nervous about this injury. I'm nervous, really nervous. If CMC's active, you have to start him. Mason is an RB1 while CMC is gone. Now, Mason might be a dynasty sell high. Every single running back in the 49ers system has succeeded except for Tevin Coleman. So I'm not sure that Jordan Mason is anything special. Plus, CMC's contract extension will keep him there in 2025 and likely 2026. He's not just going away. But with that said, I did not predict that Christian McCaffrey would get injured. I didn't predict that. That is not what I'm saying. However, I have been out and have said it so many times on Christian McCaffrey's, what his dynasty price was this offseason. I was never in on it. It was way too high. And this is why, because when you're an older running back and there's even one little problem, one little issue, the dynasty value is gone. Try going to sell Christian McCaffrey in dynasty now. You can't. So that's why I was out on him. I didn't predict the injury, but I knew what would happen if there was an injury and the value would be obliterated. So this is just my warning of be very careful with older dynasty assets, especially running backs, not players I really want to hold, especially if they're still carrying a massive dynasty value. Now, I have a bunch of Patreon questions. I don't know how many of them I'm going to get to, but we'll just start with the first one. At what point does panic meter get high on Joe Burrow? Bengals looked awful. Offensive play and calling was vanilla. For me, not yet. We saw that Burrow cooked in 2022 and in 2023 when he was healthy, not injured. Even if this year's a disaster and, you know, they get a new head coach in 2025, how out on Joe Burrow are we really going to be? Probably not very. So in Dynasty, he's still going to carry a lot of value. So how out can I really be? So the answer is not really. Of the quarterbacks in week 1, he's not the highest on my list of panic. Get this one out of the way really quick. Could Allen Lazard be a reliable fantasy option? Stranger things have happened. But no. Mike Williams is who they want to be their wide receiver 2. He'll gradually take the role back. He was active this week. Lazard feels like the classic week 1 flash. And I'm just not really in on that. And lastly, because this is also really quick, what's going on with Marvin Harrison Jr.? Why was he a non-factor in that game? Any concerns going forward? It was a bad week 1. I'll take any buying opportunity in Dynasty. I don't think there will be one. And I'm still starting him week 2 if you have him, although as more of a low-end wide receiver 2. Now, if you liked the video, make sure to drop a like and leave a comment with your thoughts. As always, the best way to support the channel is to subscribe. And don't forget to hit that notifications bell so you can be notified about all my exciting content as it drops. Of course, if you want my best fantasy football advice, it's available on the Patreon. Dynasty, redraft, start sit, and more. And every sign up helps support my independent content. But once again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all later.